The Book of Enoch, prophetic or not? One wonders why the Book of Enoch is not canonical. In other words, it is not found in the writings considered sacred. For this answer we must carefully analyze the Book of Enoch. In the first verse of the Book of Enoch Ethiopian version, we have that angels gave Enoch a vision to understand things of a future generation. In this we can define that there is nothing wrong with the linearity of sacred writings. But in the second verse we have an extremely complicated phrase that says, "I start my parables." What are parables? They represent allegories. A parable is a short narrative that uses allegories to convey a moral lesson. Parables are normal in prophets and writers after the period of David, but they are not common before that. But here it defines a parable for the Enoch period. Now supposing that the story of Enoch passed through the oral system to the descendants, it should be natural for Moses to use such a tool, but it does not. And we still have an aggravating factor. The prophetic system being a parable would define that what we talk about is just a moral lesson, which is complicated if the book of Jude is speaking of a parable as if it were something literal. And we see in verse 6 the famous text of connection with the book of Jude. All would be very good if in verse 2 had not defined that it is a parable. Now we have a problem. Did the book of Judas use a parable as something literal? Or did the book of Enoch lie in saying it was a parable? If Judas used a parable as literal, then he is wrong to say that something would happen when it would not happen. But if Enoch's book lied that it was a parable, then Judas used an unreliable book to define the prophecy. So here we have a Pandora's box or an Achilles heel that states that no matter where you go, the book of Judas risks being a book that should not be in the canonical books. We can say that Judas received a prophecy without having contact with the book of Enoch, which would be somewhat like an attempt to escape the truth. To attempt to construct that Judas received a divine inspiration independent of Enoch would be very difficult to justify. In fact, the acceptance of the book of Judas would also define the acceptance of the book of Enoch, and therefore several books considered apocryphal, which would not be of much use. If you put the apocryphal books together, they would generate so many contradictions with the canonical texts that in the end would generate total disbelief. The most rational would have been to not consider the book of Jude as canonical. And indeed the book of Judas had a great deal of trouble to accept. But pastors and denominations are now trying to get away from these issues, and we often see meaningless, tangled justifications. All this because entering into the judgment of which book is canonical and which book is not canonical can violate or even destroy certain religions. One of the great controversies is, why is the book Song of Solomon canonical? But going back to the book of Enoch, we see in chapter 3 verse 1, Enoch saying that 14 species do not strip the foliage. Notice that we are talking about Enoch, man who lived in the period before the flood, and the verse says that he was writing for future generations. Sometimes the 14 species that he mentions involve only the region and time he lived. Today we have several types of trees that do not have their foliage fall. In other words, future generations would not accept that there are only 14 species. But we could even say that it is an accepted mistake if it did not look so much like the region of Israel in the time of Zechariah and Malachi. See, if we are talking about Enoch before the flood, how does Enoch seem to speak of such a region as Israel? See, we're talking about Enoch, who lived between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, according to the scriptures, and not in Israel many miles south. But in chapter 6 of verse 1 of Enoch we have the most destructive reference. That say, when the number of the sons of men once increased, they were born beautiful and loving daughters. The angels, sons of heaven, when they saw them, desired them and said among themselves, Let us take wives from the daughters of men, and bring forth sons. We could even accept this verse if it were not a great explanation of Jesus. Jesus answered them, "You err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry, nor are given in marriage, but they are like the angels in heaven." Then said Jesus unto them, "The children of this world marry, and are given in marriage. But those who are thought worthy of reaching the age to come, in the resurrection from the dead, neither marry, nor are given in marriage. For they can no longer die, because they are equal to angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection." Jesus answered them, "Is not your mistake, that ye know not the Scriptures, neither the power of God? For when they shall rise from the dead, they shall neither marry, nor be given in marriage, but they are like angels in heaven." What we see in these verses is that Jesus said that angels do not bear children. For marriage once represented only the union between man and woman for the generation of children. So either we accept Enoch as true or Jesus as true. Indeed, playing with apocryphal books can bring about a true destruction of what is true or false.
If you are looking for more content from different areas, visit the reformadorstosod.com website. News and detailed content can be found. With system of research and organization of text and video.